Welcome back to Chatbots Behaving Badly, the show where we read the fine print so you don't have to, and where it's just a software update is treated like the horror movie line it really is. This episode is called Software Update with a Scalpel, When Smart Medical Devices Start Acting Like Consumer Tech, written by Marcus Brinsa, narrated by Brian C. Lujan. Chatbots Behaving Badly is a research initiative with Psychori. Today's story is one of my favorites for all the wrong reasons. AI in the operating room. Not the Hollywood version with a robot surgeon delivering smug one-liners. The boring version. The dangerous version. The version where AI arrives as a feature upgrade inside a device that's already in use. And if your brain just went, well, that sounds reasonable, congratulations. You have the exact human vulnerability this episode is about. Because when AI gets bolted onto medical devices, the failure mode is rarely evil machine. It's reasonable people overtrust a confident screen. And that is how you get risk, lawsuits, recalls, and a regulatory headache that can be smelled from space. To help me unpack this, I'm joined by Christy Walker, an independent researcher in healthcare technology. Christy lives in the trenches where innovation meets clinical reality, and she's here to translate the story into the stuff that actually matters: risk, validation, and what the future is likely to look like once we stop pretending AI-powered automatically means safer. Christy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I love your framing already because yes, this is the least cinematic version of AI risk, and that's why it's so important.
The least cinematic, yet somehow the most likely to hurt someone. Perfect. That's our brand. So here's the story as reported. A medical navigation system used in sinus procedures had machine learning features introduced. And afterward, regulators received a lot more reports describing malfunctions and adverse events associated with the device's use. There are allegations in reporting that in some cases, the system misinformed surgeons about where instruments were located and injuries were reported. Now, I'm going to be careful with language because this is real-world medicine and real-world people. But the pattern is what I want to focus on. AI arrives as an update, incident reports rise, and suddenly everyone is asking, wait, what exactly changed and how was it validated? Christy, when you hear a story like this, what's your first reaction?
My first reaction is, this isn't surprising. Not because harm is inevitable, but because the incentives are misaligned. You have a system that clinicians may treat as authoritative. You have vendors under pressure to differentiate products. You have a market that rewards the words AI-enabled, even when the actual benefit is modest. And you have a validation and oversight model that historically assumed devices change slowly. AI changes that. It behaves like software, and software changes fast.
You just said the sentence that makes every compliance officer reach for a paper bag. Software changes fast. Let's talk about why this risk is so sneaky. Because if you ask the average person what AI risk looks like in healthcare, they imagine a chatbot diagnosing cancer wrong. But this is different. This is a system inside a workflow that people trust. What's the psychological trap here?
It's the credibility effect. People don't evaluate every output from scratch. In a high-pressure environment, they learn a tool, build mental shortcuts, and then they rely on it. If a navigation system is right most of the time, it becomes part of the clinician's reality map. The screen becomes a reference point. Even a small error rate can become a serious hazard if the human response is, I guess it must be correct.
So it's like GPS, but with a drill.
Exactly. GPS is a perfect analogy. Most people have a story where GPS told them to do something stupid. The difference is, in a car you can stop and reassess. In a procedure, the pace, context and stakes are radically different.
And also the consequences are not you missed your exit, they're you hit something that should never be hit. So if we zoom out, where does validation usually fall down? What do companies do that looks like validation but isn't actually the thing we need?
There are a few common pitfalls. One is validating in idealized conditions. Another is using proxies that don't reflect real clinical practice, like focusing on internal performance metrics without understanding how those metrics translate into safety in real workflows. Another is underestimating human factors. You can have a model that performs well on a dataset, but the interface might lead clinicians to over-trust it, misunderstand confidence, or miss warnings. And then there's change control. This is huge. If the system is evolving, new data, new models, new tuning, you need a disciplined way to ensure updates don't introduce new failure modes. In medicine, small changes are not small.
This is where the tech world and the medical world smash into each other like two shopping carts driven by toddlers. In tech, you say, "We pushed a patch, it's fine." In medicine, you say, "We pushed a patch," and everyone replies, "You did what?" Let's do the key question. How do you validate AI-assisted medical devices in a way that's actually defensible?
Defensible validation means you can explain, demonstrate, and monitor performance under realistic conditions. You need clinical evidence that reflects the actual populations, anatomy variation, imaging variation, and workflow variation you'll see in practice. You need pre-market testing that goes beyond the model scored well and includes usability testing, human factors analysis, and failure mode analysis. Then you need post-market surveillance that isn't passive. Not just waiting for someone to file a report, but actively monitoring signals, analyzing incident patterns, and having clear thresholds for when you pause, investigate, or roll back a change. And you need transparency internally, documentation that makes it possible to reconstruct what happened. If a clinician reports a problem, you should be able to trace which software version, which model behavior, and which circumstances were present.
In other words, you need logs, audits, and humility. Three things the average product launch does not come with. Let's talk about that accuracy threshold idea that shows up in reporting around AI features in healthcare. People outside the field hear 80% accuracy and assume it means good enough. Explain why good enough is a trap.
Accuracy is not a universal safety metric. It depends on what the tool is doing, where it's used, how it's used, and what happens when it's wrong. An 80% accurate recommender is fine in entertainment. In a clinical context, if the errors cluster in dangerous edge cases, or if the tool is used in moments where humans defer to it, the risk can be unacceptable. Also, accuracy can hide variability. You can have high average performance but poor performance on specific patient groups, specific anatomy, or specific imaging conditions. Those are the scenarios that matter most.
So average accuracy is like saying the airplane lands safely most of the time, which is the kind of statement that makes me want to drive, not fly. Now let's hit the elephant in the operating room. Regulation. We have regulators, we have approvals, we have processes, yet stories like this keep happening. Why?
Regulation is necessary, but it's not magic. The pace and complexity are increasing. Regulators rely on manufacturers to submit evidence. The evidence may be limited by what's feasible, by what's designed into studies, and by what's disclosed. Also, the ecosystem is evolving. These products are changing more frequently, and the idea of a device as a stable object doesn't fit well with continuous learning or frequent updates. And even with oversight, post-market reality can diverge from pre-market assumptions. The real world always has more variety and more weirdness than your trial.
The real world always has more weirdness should be stitched onto the sleeve of every product manager, like a warning label. Okay, so here's the thing the audience always asks me after episodes like this. Should we be scared of AI in medicine? And I always want to answer with, yes, but also, please keep going because fear is not a strategy. Christy, what's the correct emotional reaction here?
Cautious optimism with hard guardrails. AI can genuinely help in medicine. There are real use cases: image analysis, workflow assistance, decision support. But helpful depends on discipline. Without discipline, you get hype-driven deployment. With discipline, you can get meaningful improvements. The key is to stop treating AI as a magical ingredient and start treating it as a safety-critical component. And to recognize that the system includes people, interfaces, training, and oversight, not just a model.
So what you're saying is, the future can be good, but only if we stop acting like a press release is a validation plan. Let's get practical. Suppose you're a hospital evaluating AI-enabled devices or AI-enabled updates. What should you demand before letting it into your workflow?
You should demand evidence that matches your context. What populations were validated? What imaging conditions? What clinical settings? What were failure modes? How does the tool communicate uncertainty? What training is required? What's the monitoring plan? You should demand clarity on updates. How often? What triggers updates? What's revalidated? And how you're informed. You should ensure there's a process for incident reporting and investigation that is fast and transparent. And you should ensure accountability is clear. Who is responsible when the tool misbehaves? And how quickly can it be disabled or rolled back?
I love that your list is basically, don't buy vibes, buy governance. Now let's do the future, because the AI industry loves a future. What do you think the next few years look like here?
You define decision rights and responsibilities explicitly. You treat AI behavior as part of the device's safety profile. You make documentation and training part of deployment, not a PDF nobody reads. You create internal governance in hospitals that includes clinical leadership, IT, compliance, and risk management. And you require vendors to provide meaningful transparency and support. Accountability doesn't happen by accident. It has to be designed.
Accountability doesn't happen by accident is the line I'm going to repeat until someone sends me a cease and desist. Okay, last big question, and I'm going to ask it in the most CBB way possible. What's the easiest lie we tell ourselves about AI in healthcare?
That because it's high-tech, it must be more accurate. That smarter means safer. And that if something is regulated, it must be fully understood and controlled. Those beliefs can lead to complacency. The reality is, safety comes from process, monitoring, and humility, not from buzzwords.
And humility is the one ingredient Silicon Valley keeps forgetting to put in the recipe. Christy, this has been excellent. Before I let you go, I want a closing thought for listeners. If you had to give one sentence that should stick in people's heads after this story, what is it?
Treat AI-enabled updates in healthcare like safety events, not like software upgrades.
That is the correct sentence. That is the tattoo. That is the bumper sticker. That is the thing you tape to the monitor in every meeting where someone says, "Can we ship it this quarter?" Christy Walker, independent researcher in healthcare technologies, thank you for coming on.
Thanks. This was fun, which is not a word you hear often in healthcare risk conversations.
We do what we can. And to the rest of you, if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. AI doesn't have to be malicious to be dangerous. It just has to be persuasive enough that humans stop double-checking it. In a consumer app, that's annoying. In an operating room, that's a governance failure with a patient attached. This was Software Update with a Scalpel. When smart medical devices start acting like consumer tech. Written by Marcus Brinsa, narrated by Brian C. Lujan. Chatbots Behaving Badly is a research initiative with Psychori. New episodes drop every Tuesday. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with the person in your life who says AI-powered, like it's a synonym for safe. I'll put the article link in the show notes. See you next time.